Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming at this very important meeting. Today is a good day for all of us because it's the beginning of the third industrial revolution. Now it's possible to debate not only on sacrifices but also on growth for jobs in Europe. For me, industrial policy is a key point. My slogan is, without a new industrial policy, no growth, no jobs. C'est pour cela qu'aujourd'hui,
which is why today, dear friends, we have organized this day of work and reflection. The European Commission is here to support you, to give you an opportunity to look together amongst good friends and to discuss issues. I'd like to thank the ministers with us, Kalimera. I'd also like to thank the entrepreneurs, the new president of the Union of Italian Enterprises, Mr. Quincy, who is president also of the European Chemical Association, a major entrepreneur, and everyone else, of course. I'd also like to thank our friend Jeremy Rifkin. The European Commission, as I said, is going to open its doors to start a debate about a new industrial policy for the European Union. What we have to do today, but also we need to look further ahead and come up with a strategy for the future, so that in the coming years we have a European policy promoting growth. I'd also like to welcome all our friends who speak Spanish, which is a language that is spoken widely in Latin America, of course, and it's also very important for growth in Europe. So it's good to be able to speak Spanish for our friends too. As you know, when we use the interpretation service, I tend to give my speeches in Italian. So today, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm happy to speak to you in Italian, also as a sign of solidarity with my fellow countrymen who this morning suffered another major earthquake in the whole of the north of Italy. We don't yet know how many victims there are, but there was a tremor a few minutes ago which provoked major damage in the Emilia-Romagna region. We don't yet know, however, what the consequences of that latest earthquake have been. I'd like now to start my speech to you by sounding a note of optimism for our European future, by quoting one of the fathers of Europe. We often forget that he was one of the men who most believed in Europe. That is Winston Churchill, who once said, "Pessimists see difficulty in every opportunity. Optimists see opportunity in every difficulty." Let me say straight away that I am one of the optimists. It's true that Europe is facing an economic and social situation which has been unprecedented since the last war. Apart from the need to create new jobs and to become competitive again, we are facing a number of challenges to our very way of life. Growing world population, aging population in Europe, increasing pressure on raw materials, energy, and the climate emergency. In a few years' time, in 2020, the world will be a very different place to what it is today. If we look at the current Figures that GDP will be up from 70 to over $120 trillion. 70% of growth will be borne by the emerging countries who will make up half of future world GDP, and China will be ahead of the EU. The reasons for these rates of growth, which are 5 points higher than what we've seen in the EU over the last 10 years, are linked especially to demographics and the new demand driven by rising per capita income. Every year, the population of the world increases by 70 million, and by 2030, the consumption of energy will have doubled, meaning that our dependency on imported gas and oil will be up to 80% and 90%, respectively. Overall, world energy consumption will double, and we will also see growth increasing, with more than 2 billion people entering the section of population with income between $10,000 to $30,000. There will be a huge increase in consumption of goods. We will see a big increase in the number of cars in the world, from 800 million to 1.6 billion. In China alone, increasing from 60 to 600 million. By 2015, we'll have 2.5 billion vehicles in the world. So if we're to continue on the basis of today's technologies, the current dependence on hydrocarbons and the emissions which damage our climate would increase by 50%. Energy security, access to prime material alongside a speculation on them would place increasing risk growth and our industrial base in Europe. These are formidable challenges. Europe, however, should not shrink from them. On the contrary, we need to give ourselves a real strategy, seizing those opportunities which will lead us to change, so that we can exploit the new demand for goods and services, and above all, so that we can create jobs, which remains a fundamental objective of everything that we are doing in industrial policy. Now, of course, policy and politicians have a role to play, and we need to drive forward a third industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution brought change in the economy through the use of steam and coal to drive machines, and the second revolution was driven by oil. And now, since our economy is going through profound change, we need to think hard about new technologies based on digital technology, advanced materials, fundamental labeling technologies, genome science, space, robotics, renewables, and recycling of raw materials. This revolution, which affects many sectors, from manufacturing to services to energy to raw materials to infrastructure, transport, construction, tourism, and chemicals, to name but a few. These are key sectors from a point of view of change, which should give Europe again a leading role. The guiding thread in this revolution will be technological development, our ability to adapt ourselves, and also the creation of new professions, because we need to respond to new demand if we are to promote growth, and above all, if we are to create new jobs, which I again stress as a main objective. Banks and financial sector are also key if we are to help business invest in the future and seize these opportunities. Our Danish colleague was saying that just this now, access to credit is fundamental for our economy. I believe that we in Europe, as we are already doing, and as President Barroso recorded in his opening words, cannot do without a plan for growth based on industrial innovation. The coming years will be crucial. I've got a few facts and figures here. Only 9% of our exports from Europe go to China, even less to India, Brazil and other emerging countries. Europe should get into this game with more conviction. There are potentially millions of new jobs if, for example, we use resources more efficiently, we use fundamental enabling technology, digital technology and creative industries. We need to make the right choices at the right time. We need new standards and targets in Europe which will enable us to move forward, but chosen in the context of a stable framework which doesn't pose obstacles to progress. We also need more investment in research which is close to industry, in infrastructure, materials and immaterials too. Also education and training which targets more where the demand is for new jobs. With the 2020 strategy, we set the right course. Now we need to step up the pace if we are to escape the crisis. So we need to work harder and faster. Between 2008 and 2009, the Americans and the Chinese to relaunch their internal demand and competitiveness committed respectively $780 and $500 billion. And I heard this morning that China is actually increasing its intervention in favor of growth. So we too need a more ambitious plan for growth in Europe, which will accelerate our transition towards a more sustainable and competitive economy, but does not create new debt, but on the contrary, helps us to consolidate our public accounts by using better our resources. Today's conference is an opportunity for us to take stock of where the new technological frontiers lie that are driving this revolution and the strategy we need to use in Europe to exploit growth potential. I'd like to thank, therefore, President Barroso, ministers, business leaders and stakeholders, and Jeremy Rifkin, too, who I hope will all make a contribution towards concrete proposals that can be made so that we can get out of the crisis and take a leading role regards our own future. But what will be the driving sectors in this new revolution if we are to have a more competitive and efficient and sustainable industry in Europe? Efficiency is an important issue. Every percentage point increase in efficient use of resources is worth 23 billion euros, 150,000 new jobs. So this is potential which we should exploit as a priority if we're to grow. President Barroso and the Danish presidency both stress the importance of small and medium-sized businesses, 23 million of them in Europe. In fact, 99% of our businesses in Europe are small and medium-sized, providing 67% of our jobs. And according to a recent study, SMEs create 85% of new jobs. So we need to make sure that small and medium-sized businesses remain competitive so they can continue to innovate and be of quality whilst being sustainable and capable of exporting. So with greater investment in efficiency, renewables, recycling or production of green goods and services, that by 2014 we will be able to create 2.3 million extra jobs on top of the 6 million already created in these sectors. But having said that, in Europe we must not forget the automotive sector, which represents a strong point in our industrial policy. 12 million jobs in the EU are related to the automotive sector. Cars, the automotive sector, is at the source of most private investment in research. So increasingly it will be a strategic sector, notwithstanding problems it has to confront. But we need to see how we can accompany growth in the sector. The Commission issued its communication on cars of the future, and here we outlined a two-pillar approach. On the one hand, working on greater efficiency from hot engines, internal combustion engines, which will still be the most widely in use in the next 20 years, but also we need to prepare ourselves for cold engines with zero emissions. Some studies estimate the value of the EU market for electric cars alone to be 170 billion euros, worth 110,000 new jobs by 2030. Now, of course, more electric cars is linked to reducing technological barriers, reducing the costs for battery, shortening recharging times, having more recharging points available in our cities. And Dr. Conte, I'm sure, will be able to tell you more about all of that. That's an industry he is heading up, and he'll tell you what they're doing. But the Green Cars Initiative will make available EU funds and EIB loans to support technological development so we can overcome these technological barriers. On the 6th of June, let us also mention conclusion of work of Cars 21, where we're presenting the new action lines for a new strategy for cars. Things to be done not tomorrow, but today. Another important sector I'd like to talk about is renewable energy. That's an important sector where we also need to do some hard thinking and hard work. There are emerging sources such as hydroelectric mines, geothermic, new biomass, second, third generation biofuels, which are attracting major investment, creating new jobs and new professions. Thanks also to innovation of the chemicals sector, we will be able to make big steps forward. REACH has been a great use to us, and we thank the chemical industries for making the sacrifices under REACH to make themselves more competitive. Renewables is also a sector we need to concentrate a great deal on, whilst not forgetting competition. I'm thinking of photovoltaic panels, for example, where China, unfortunately, is overtaking our products. But that's not a reason to give up. Another major subject which we were talking about yesterday evening at a dinner with Jeremy Rifkin and some journalists is buildings, quite simply. Construction sector, which is a huge industry, not just in Spain, which has to get over its own crisis in that area, and in Greece, but the whole of the European Union. Here too, there is a need to do some more work to make sure we have more efficient buildings, safer buildings too. It's all very well having competitive buildings. They need to be safer and efficient too, and as such, they can become a flagship industry. At Istanbul, at the meeting of the European construction sector, I will be presenting an action plan to support recovery in the construction sector, which is going through a difficult patch right now. But there are major opportunities for investment still in construction and for creating jobs, and I think they can pay off because they can save you on your energy bills. In some EU countries, for example, energy costs 200% more than in China. Another sector which the third industrial revolution will have to focus on is tourism. For many years, tourism has been regarded as not a very significant or interesting sector. But under the Lisbon Treaty, the Commission assumed a role also regards tourism policy. Sustainable tourism is another important sector, and we need to make sure that Europe remains an attractive tourist destination for the rest of the world, the number one destination. A week ago in Merida, in Mexico, at G20, we stressed the need to make changes to visa rules to make it easier for people to visit our countries as tourists. Another major sector is intelligent networks in our cities. Smart cities are a Commission objective which we are investing considerably in. Another issue for industry, of course, is access to raw materials, a very sensitive subject. We are and will continue to be doing much to make sure that our businesses are competitive in this respect. In a few weeks' time, I'll be going to Greenland with the Danish presidency to sign a first agreement with that country so that we can collaborate more closely on raw materials. And I have signed similar agreements with many Latin American countries, with the African Union, and we are setting great store by our innovation partnership there to have a strong policy on recycling and substitution so that we can reduce the costs of raw materials, which often are a victim of speculation, but that hampers the real economy and industry in the European Union. We really must react to what is happening in that area by taking constant action to make sure that raw materials can be bought at prices which are not crazy by our industry. Another fundamental area for us is enabling technologies and chemicals. In the first half of June, the Commission will present a strategy for fundamental enabling technologies in Europe, micro and nanotechnologies, advanced materials, biotechnology, photonics, nanotechnology, innovative manufacturing as driving forces behind Europe's competitiveness and technological leadership. The direct and indirect economic impact of this technology at global level is estimated at $646 billion in 2008, and it's likely to be up to 1,000 billion already by 2015. Another sector is space. We in Europe play a leading role. We have started an ambitious project with Galileo. We already have EGNOS up and running. Galileo will be operational as of the end of 2014. And final implementation with the constellation of 30 satellites in 2020. And then we have to work hard on GMES to roll that out. Benefits of these space and satellite policies will be felt in terms of land-based services. They provide for intelligent transport nexus for agriculture, civil protection, fisheries, fighting clandestine migration, and so on. But we can expect the savings, thanks to such systems, of 90-70 billion in the coming years. But what role for policy in Europe in all of this? We need to make a cultural leap forward, continuing along the lines sketched out in the Europe 2020 strategy. We need to ensure the necessary synergies between our various policies in favour of industry. At the same time, we have to support the digital economy and telecommunications, which allow information and know-how to move more easily. Cloud computing, such things as 3D printers capable of manufacturing tailor-made objects, self-adjusting machines, assembly line robots, space technology with Earth applications, just a few examples. Also, we need to ensure that it's easier to access credit. We can't accelerate change if there's no possible access for business to money. So we need to make a cultural leap forward there and help our businesses. We need to strengthen the internal market and make significant public and private investment. We need to set standard rules also to encourage investors. One of the problems we have is that for too long we have had rules that have not really worked in practice, such as with public procurement, where it's still too complicated. How then can we help industrial innovation? More EU funding has been earmarked in our budget through to 2020 with COSME and the project bonds that President Barroso mentioned, but we need to do more still. Loans with low interest rates, tax incentives are various instruments which can be used so that we can make up the shortfall, because we continue to have to spend a lot of money to import most of the gas and oil which we consume, and then also there's a need for industry to pay more for CO2 emitting rights in the ETS after 2013. In all of this, there's a greater role for the EIB. The informal summit last Wednesday moved towards that, reaching in principle agreement on increasing the EIB's capital. A further thing which I need to stress on the subject of access to credit is, and I do this to the Danish presidency and ministers from other EU countries, I urge governments to take action on dealing with the legislation on late payments, because it places it at risk the life of thousands of companies. There is an EU directive which I do hope will be transposed and put into practice in good time by March 2013. But it's going slowly, so I have written to all member states to get on with it, because this is important. It's only by getting money to flow again, for example by making people pay on time, that we can get growth going again. There's a large amount of money owing by public bodies to private companies, for example. Also, we need to work on implementation of Basel III. Agreements on transparency are welcome, but let me put it to friends from the Parliament who are here. I agree with Commissioner Barnier that Basel III should not be taken as an excuse for penalising small and medium-sized businesses. We need to make sure that banks can collect savings and give loans to businesses and families. That should be the number one objective, supporting business. I think also on such a late payment, I think it's a moral duty on the part of the administration to pay business when they buy things, as it is of our citizens to pay their taxes. Another important aspect of industrial policy we need is updating our public administration. And we can't live with an administrative situation which frequently has different administrations getting in each other's way, only slowing down growth. We need to make a fundamental change here, because otherwise, for love of stamps and red tape and paper, we run the risk of blocking growth in our economy. This is work that is being driven forward under Dalia Carica Crespo, who is Mr. SME for the European Union, and the 27 ambassadors for European SMEs who will be having another meeting in a few days' time in Malta, so that they can cut through as much bureaucratic red tape as possible. It's getting in the way of our entrepreneurial policy. Internationalization too would be helpful. I mentioned some work we're doing with Latin America. If we want to avoid business relocating to other continents, we have to internationalize our own companies. We may have to set up plants in other countries, but we need to play our own proactive role. Many European countries are doing this. This is what modern markets need. One should be less disingenuous about this. We need to protect, above all in our trade agreements, our own industry. Obviously, trade is a strong and important instrument, but a level playing field is a rule that should apply to everyone. So to meet this challenge, we need to work at the same time very much on educating and training our youngsters. We're short of engineers, we're short of tourism operators, we're short in many sectors of young people with the right skills who can play an active role and promote growth. We have two problems really. We've got young researchers who leave Europe to work elsewhere, Asia, United States, because they can't find anything in Europe. Whereas at the same time, our own businesses are struggling to find young people who can meet their demands. That's why clusters is something we'll be keen to develop further, because this relationship between industry, especially small and medium-sized businesses, and universities is crucial for our competitiveness. Let me conclude by talking more about the political role to be played by the European Commission over the coming months, indeed years. Now we are aware, and we have to say this actually with some pride out loud, that manufacturing still accounts for 37 million jobs in Europe, plus another 76 million which provide services that without manufacturing would not exist. Without a manufacturing base there would be fewer jobs and we wouldn't be able to innovate. And that is why policy without setting too many rules should be strong enough to make it clear to the entrepreneurial and business community that we believe in industry and that we should pave the way for a real industrial policy which can guarantee jobs and growth and innovation, which will require a different policy on energy. And I'd like to be clear on that. I have mentioned during this speech the green economy a great deal, and also the need to use renewables to fight climate change. But that does not mean that industry should be compelled to make sacrifices that are intolerable to it. Let me be quite clear on that. Until we've got a global agreement, we can't change our European 2020 objective. I'd like to reassure everybody in industry on that count. Industry, I believe, wants to play a leading role in bringing about these changes. Also, by way of conclusion, I'd like to send a message to young people, because they represent our future. We need to give them hope. We need to involve them. We need to encourage them to become entrepreneurs themselves. It's not just a question of competing for personal public administration. You can set up your own business as well. A lot of entrepreneurs in this room started out. They started by themselves or with their family and became their own key players in an industry which has brought great benefit to you and will continue to do so. And that's why we wish to work on a European plan for entrepreneurship, which should enhance, for example, access to credit, venture capital, startup. We have such programs as exchanges of an Erasmus kind for young entrepreneurs. So we need to encourage young people to be bold, to take risks. Growth is what we need to target. And that means also defending our currency. Wednesday's informal summit tackled the key issues of the crisis and discussed without any taboos a number of essential issues, including such things as euro bonds, which could help us contain debt and put a brake on speculation around spreads. That's a subject we need to discuss further. We know some are for, some are against, but when you talk about industrial policy, you've also got to address these issues. There are project bonds, they're almost there. Eurobonds we still have to discuss. But also we need proper guarantee schemes for deposits to give greater certainty to business. And my own personal position is that we should also look again at the role to be played by the European Central Bank. I myself believe that the ECB should play a role ever more similar to that of a Fed if we want to have strong action in favour of growth. Draghi's done a good job within the terms of today's rules. He's tried to help growth as much as he can. But I think more can be done in this respect by the ECB. The summit also was more aware of the fact that budget rules alone aren't going to solve our problems and rebalance the books. We need a real pact in favour of growth alongside the fiscal pact. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient, a fiscal pact. Measures to stimulate the economy, investing in research and infrastructure, certain figures not to be included in the accounts of deficit and debt when they're good investment can help us. Also increase capital for EIB and promotion of the project bonds. The crisis is serious. There is a real risk that we may lose the benefits of 60 years of integration. This requires exceptional measures, also in the short term. And some of these will have to be taken at European level if they are really going to be effective. I started by quoting Winston Churchill. I'd like to finish, since I'm also in charge of transatlantic relations and important for growth, I'd like to finish by quoting F.D. Roosevelt, the American president. At the worst moment in recession, he said, "We will get out of the crisis and we will prosper anew. The only thing we need fear is fear itself." But we are not afraid.